The air in the old Victorian house always held a certain stillness, a quiet that both comforted and unnerved Eleanor. It had been her childhood home, now hers and Daniel's for the past 15 years. From the outside, with its sprawling porch and overgrown ivy, it looked like the perfect picture of domestic tranquility. Inside, however, a subtle disquiet had taken root, a feeling as persistent and unwelcome as the dampness that sometimes crept in from the nearby woods. It centered around the room at the end of the upstairs hallway. Daniel had always been a private man, quiet and thoughtful, the kind of person who kept his own counsel. Eleanor had always respected this, even admired it. It was part of what drew her to him all those years ago, that air of gentle mystery. But over the past few years, his privacy had evolved, hardening into something that felt more like secrecy. And it all seemed to revolve around that one room. It wasn't a large room, perhaps a former study or a small guest bedroom. When they had first moved in, it had been empty, filled with the same dusty silence as the rest of the house. Eleanor had suggested turning it into a home office, a place where she could pursue her writing in peace. Daniel had agreed, or so she thought. Weeks passed, then months, and the room remained untouched. Whenever Eleanor brought it up, Daniel would deflect, his eyes momentarily clouding over with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Then came the lock. It was a heavy, brass deadbolt, the kind you'd expect to find on an exterior door. Eleanor had noticed it one afternoon while dusting the hallway. Her fingers brushed against the cool metal, and she stopped, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. She hadn't heard Daniel install it. He hadn't mentioned it. "What's this?" she had asked him that evening, trying to keep her tone light, casual. Daniel had been sitting in his usual armchair by the fireplace, a book open in his lap, though she suspected he hadn't been reading. He looked up, a flicker of something. Surprise? Guilt? Crossing his face before he masked it with a neutral expression. "Oh, that," he said, his voice calm, too calm. "It's just a place for some of my things. Things I don't want disturbed." "Disturbed?" Eleanor echoed, a small frown creasing her brow. "What kind of things?" He hesitated for a moment, his gaze drifting towards the hallway. "Old papers, mostly. Some projects I'm working on." Eleanor let it go, or tried to, but the image of that heavy lock remained in her mind, a stark symbol of the growing distance between them. She knew Daniel collected antique books and had a penchant for tinkering with old electronics, but neither of those hobbies seemed to warrant such intense security. Days turned into weeks, and the locked room became a silent, looming presence in their home. Eleanor found herself listening for sounds from behind the door, though she never heard anything. She would catch Daniel glancing at it as they passed in the hallway, a guarded look in his eyes that she had never seen before. Their conversations, once filled with easy banter and shared thoughts, became more guarded. Eleanor found herself censoring her questions, afraid of the reaction they might provoke. The unspoken secret hung between them like a thick curtain, suffocating the warmth and intimacy they had once shared. One rainy afternoon, while Daniel was away on a business trip, Eleanor found herself drawn to the locked room. The house was quiet, the only sound the rhythmic drumming of rain against the windows. She stood in front of the door, her hand hovering over the cool metal of the lock. A sudden, almost overwhelming urge to know what lay behind it washed over her. She knew she shouldn't. Daniel had been clear, even if his explanation had been vague. But the secrecy felt like a wall between them, and Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was behind that door was somehow affecting their marriage, changing the man she thought she knew. Driven by a curiosity that bordered on obsession, she began to search. She looked through Daniel's desk, his drawers, anywhere she thought he might keep a spare key. She found old receipts, faded photographs, and notebooks filled with his neat, precise handwriting, but no key to the locked room. As she searched, Eleanor couldn't help but reflect on their life together. They had met in their early 30s, both seemingly settled in their lives but yearning for something more. Their connection had been instant and deep, a comfortable companionship that quickly blossomed into love. They had married within a year, bought this house, and built a life that, on the surface, appeared idyllic. But had it all been an illusion? Had Daniel always harbored secrets? A hidden life that she had never suspected? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. She remembered small things, moments she had dismissed at the time but now took on a new, unsettling significance. A phone call he'd taken in hushed tones in another room. A sudden trip he couldn't fully explain. A fleeting look of sadness in his eyes that he'd quickly masked. Could these seemingly insignificant moments be pieces of a larger, darker puzzle? Was the locked room the key to understanding the man she had married? Or would it reveal a truth she couldn't bear to face? The rain continued to fall, each drop a relentless reminder of the secrets hidden within the walls of their seemingly peaceful home. Eleanor stood in the hallway, the locked door a silent challenge. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she wouldn't be able to rest until she knew what lay behind it. The comfortable stillness of the house had been shattered, replaced by a gnawing unease and the unsettling feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Days turned into a tense, unspoken game of cat and mouse. Daniel returned from his trip, seemingly oblivious to Eleanor's inner turmoil. He acted as he always did, kind, considerate, yet still holding that impenetrable wall around himself, symbolized by the locked door. Eleanor tried to act normal too, but the effort was exhausting. Every shared meal, every casual conversation felt strained, colored by the secret that loomed between them. One evening, while Daniel was showering, Eleanor's gaze fell upon his briefcase. It was usually locked, but today the latch seemed slightly ajar. A reckless impulse took hold of her. She glanced at the bathroom door, then quickly opened the briefcase. Inside, amongst business documents and travel itineraries, she found a small, leather-bound journal. Her heart pounded as she picked it up. It didn't look like his usual notebooks. This one was old, the leather worn and soft. Hesitantly, she opened it. The pages were filled with Daniel's familiar handwriting, but the tone was different, more raw, more emotional than she had ever seen in his letters or notes. The entries began several years before they had met. They spoke of a deep and all-consuming love for someone named Clara. The words were filled with passion, longing, and a profound sense of loss. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat as she read about their shared dreams, their intimate moments, and then, abruptly, the entries turned darker. Clara had been ill, seriously ill. The later entries detailed Daniel's anguish, his desperate attempts to care for her, and finally, the unbearable pain of her death. Eleanor sank onto the bed, the journal trembling in her hands. She had never known about Clara. Daniel had never mentioned her. 15 years of marriage, and this significant part of his past had remained completely hidden from her. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over her, sadness for the young man who had clearly loved so deeply and grieved so intensely, but also a sharp pang of betrayal. Why had he kept this from her? Had their entire relationship been built on a foundation of unspoken grief and hidden memories? She continued to read, her fingers tracing the faded ink. The last entry about Clara was dated just months before she and Daniel had met. It spoke of a man shattered by loss, unsure if he could ever love again. And then the journal abruptly ended. The following pages were blank. Eleanor carefully placed the journal back in the briefcase, her mind reeling. This was a significant piece of the puzzle, a glimpse into the emotional landscape of the man she had married. But it didn't explain the locked room. It didn't explain the secrecy that had grown between them in recent years. A few days later, Eleanor found something else. Daniel had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. He had been looking at photographs. As she walked past, one image caught her eye. It was a picture of a young woman, her face framed by dark, curly hair, her eyes sparkling with a lively intelligence. Eleanor didn't recognize her. There was a faint resemblance to Daniel around the eyes, but that was all. Driven by an impulse she couldn't control, she clicked on the image. The file name was simply Clara. Eleanor's heart sank. This was her, the woman from the journal. She studied the photograph, trying to understand the depth of Daniel's connection to her. There was a vibrant joy in Clara's smile, a sense of warmth that seemed to radiate from the faded image. As she clicked through other files on the laptop, Eleanor found more pictures of Clara, alone and with Daniel, their faces young and full of hope. There were also scanned documents, medical bills, what looked like research papers, and then a birth certificate. The name listed under mother was Clara, and under father was Daniel. The date of birth was 10 years ago. 10 years ago. Eleanor's mind raced. If this birth certificate was real, it meant Daniel had a child with Clara. A child he had never told her about. A child who would be around 10 years old now. The implications were staggering. Could this be the reason for the locked room? Was his child living there? The thought was both terrifying and absurd. How could Daniel keep such a monumental secret from her? Just then, she heard Daniel's car pulling into the driveway. Panic seized her. She quickly closed the laptop, her hands shaking. She retreated to the living room, trying to appear calm as he walked in. "Hey," he said, leaning in to kiss her. His lips felt foreign against hers, his presence suddenly imbued with a layer of deceit. "Hi," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. The evening passed in a blur. Eleanor found herself watching Daniel, scrutinizing his every word, every gesture. He seemed preoccupied, lost in his own thoughts. At one point, she almost blurted out what she had found, but something held her back. A sense of dread, a fear of the truth she was uncovering. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She lay in bed beside Daniel, his breathing deep and even, while her mind raced. The image of Clara's smiling face, the words of love and loss in the journal, and the shocking revelation of the birth certificate swirled in her thoughts. She knew she couldn't ignore this. She had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The locked room no longer felt like just a symbol of Daniel's privacy. It felt like a barrier hiding a life she knew nothing about. The next morning, Eleanor decided to be direct. She waited until after breakfast, when Daniel was sitting in the living room, reading the newspaper. "Daniel," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I need to ask you something." He looked up, his eyes questioning. "It's about the locked room," she continued, her gaze steady despite the turmoil within. "What's really in there, Daniel?" His face paled visibly. He folded the newspaper, his hands clenching tightly around it. He avoided her gaze, looking out the window instead. "Eleanor," he said finally, his voice low, It's complicated." "Complicated how?" she pressed. "Is it about Clara?" His head snapped back, his eyes wide with surprise and something akin to fear. How do you know about Clara?" Eleanor hesitated for a moment, then decided to tell him the truth. She told him about finding the journal, about seeing the photographs on his laptop, about the birth certificate. As she spoke, Daniel's carefully constructed composure crumbled. He ran a hand through his hair, his expression a mixture of anguish and defeat. "Oh, Eleanor," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "I never meant for you to find out this way." He finally met her gaze, and in his eyes, she saw a depth of pain she had never witnessed before. He began to speak, the words tumbling out in a rush, a story of love, loss, and a secret he had carried for 10 long years. He told her about Clara's illness, about their brief but intense happiness, and about the miracle of their daughter, Lily, born just before Clara passed away. Eleanor listened in stunned silence as Daniel explained that he had kept Lily a secret out of fear of Eleanor's reaction, fear of disrupting their life, fear of reliving the pain of Clara's death. He had arranged for Lily to be cared for by a trusted family friend, visiting her often, providing for her needs, but keeping her existence entirely separate from his life with Eleanor. The locked room, he explained, was where he kept Lily's things, her drawings, her favorite toys, photographs of her growing up. It was his private sanctuary, a place where he could connect with the daughter he couldn't openly acknowledge. The revelations hit Eleanor like a physical blow. A secret child, a decade of lies and omissions. The foundation of their marriage felt like it had shattered into a million pieces. The comfortable stillness of their home had been replaced by a deafening silence, filled only with the weight of unspoken truths and the wreckage of their shared past. The silence that followed Daniel's confession was thick with unspoken accusations and raw emotion. Eleanor stared at him, her mind struggling to process the enormity of his betrayal. A child. Their 10th anniversary had passed just last month. 10 years of shared life, holidays, birthdays, and not once had he breathed a word about his daughter. Why, Daniel? Why keep something like this a secret for so long? Her voice was barely a whisper, laced with disbelief and pain. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a desperate plea for understanding. I was afraid, Eleanor, afraid of losing you, afraid of what it would mean for our life together. After Clara, after losing her, I didn't think I could handle losing anyone else I loved. But you did lose me, Daniel, Eleanor retorted, her voice rising with each word. You lost my trust. You built a life with me on a foundation of lies. Did you ever truly love me? Or was I just a substitute? A way to fill the void Clara left behind? The question hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. Daniel flinched as if struck. No, Eleanor, that's not true. I love you. I do. But the pain of losing Clara, and then having Lily, it was all so overwhelming. I made a terrible mistake keeping it a secret. A selfish mistake. A mistake, Eleanor repeated, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Daniel, you have a 10-year-old daughter that I know nothing about. That's not a mistake. That's an entire hidden life. The argument escalated, years of unspoken frustrations and growing distance finally erupting. Eleanor felt a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, betrayal, confusion, and a deep, aching sadness. The man she thought she knew, the man she had built her life with, was a stranger. As the initial shock began to subside, a cold, hard resolve settled within Eleanor. She needed to see this child. She needed to understand the reality of the secret that had so profoundly impacted her life. I want to meet her, Daniel, she said, her voice firm. I want to meet Lily. Daniel hesitated, his face a mask of anxiety. Eleanor, I don't know if that's a good idea right now. She doesn't know about you. She thinks I'm just a close family friend. Then it's time she knew the truth, isn't it? Eleanor challenged. It's time we all faced the truth. Reluctantly, Daniel agreed. He made a phone call, his voice hushed, arranging for Eleanor to meet Lily the following day. The anticipation of the meeting was a heavy weight in Eleanor's chest, a mixture of apprehension and a strange sense of longing. The next day, Daniel drove them to a small, unassuming house on the other side of town. As they pulled up, Eleanor's hands trembled. A young girl with dark, curly hair, the spitting image of the woman in the photograph, was playing in the front yard. Her laughter, light and carefree, pierced Eleanor's carefully constructed composure. Daniel approached Lily cautiously, kneeling down to speak to her. Eleanor watched from the car, her heart pounding in her chest. After a few moments, Daniel turned and beckoned her to join them. As Eleanor walked towards them, Lily looked up, her bright, curious eyes fixed on her. Daniel introduced Eleanor as a very special friend. Eleanor forced a smile, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. Over the next few hours, Eleanor observed Lily, noticing the small gestures that reminded her of Daniel, the spark of intelligence in her eyes that mirrored Clara's photograph. She felt a strange mix of emotions, a pang of jealousy for the life Daniel had shared with this child without her, but also a stirring of warmth and protectiveness towards this innocent girl who was unknowingly caught in the middle of their complicated lives. As the day wore on, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, something Daniel still wasn't telling her. There were inconsistencies in his explanations, fleeting moments of unease in his eyes when he spoke about Clara's final years. Driven by a need for the complete truth, Eleanor decided to do some digging of her own. While Daniel was out taking Lily to the park, Eleanor went to the locked room. She found the key hidden in Daniel's desk, tucked away in a box of old photographs. Her heart pounded as she unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was small and cluttered, filled with the child's belongings, colorful drawings taped to the walls, shelves lined with well-loved toys, and a small bed tucked into the corner. felt like a snapshot of a life lived in secret. But it was in a dusty box in the closet that Eleanor found something that made her blood run cold. It was a stack of medical bills and correspondence, all related to Clara's illness. As Eleanor read through them, she noticed something unsettling. The timeline didn't quite add up with what Daniel had told her. Some of the bills were dated after Clara's supposed death. Confused and increasingly suspicious, Eleanor searched further. She found a hidden compartment in an old wooden chest. Inside, there was a small, tarnished silver locket and a letter. The letter was addressed to Clara, dated just a few months prior. The handwriting wasn't Daniel's. It was frantic, desperate, pleading with Clara to leave, to disappear, for her own safety. The letter mentioned someone named Marcus and hinted at a dangerous situation. Eleanor opened the locket. Inside, there was a tiny photograph, not of Clara, but of a young Daniel with another woman, a woman Eleanor had never seen before. The woman had piercing blue eyes and a distinctive birthmark on her cheek. Just then, Eleanor heard the front door open. Daniel and Lily were home. Eleanor quickly closed the chest, her mind reeling. The pieces of the puzzle were shifting, forming a picture far more complex and sinister than she could have ever imagined. The secret of Lily's existence was just the tip of the iceberg. There was another woman, a dangerous situation, and a timeline that didn't make sense. As Daniel walked into the room, a look of shock and fear washing over his face as he saw Eleanor inside, she held up the letter. "Who is Marcus, Daniel?" she asked, her voice low and dangerous. "And why was Clara told to disappear?" The color drained from Daniel's face. He looked from Eleanor to the letter, his eyes filled with a terror she had never witnessed before. In that moment, Eleanor knew that the locked room held more than just the secret of a hidden child. It held a truth that was far darker and more dangerous than she could have ever anticipated. A truth that threatened to shatter everything she thought she knew about her husband and their life together. The carefully constructed facade of their marriage had finally crumbled, revealing the treacherous secrets hidden beneath. The confrontation in the locked room hung heavy with unspoken fear. Daniel's initial shock quickly morphed into a desperate attempt to explain, his words tumbling out in a panicked rush. He confessed that Marcus was Clara's estranged and abusive brother, a man who had made her life a living hell. The woman in the locket, he explained, was Clara's sister, Lena. According to Daniel, Clara had faked her own death to escape Marcus, with his help and Lena's. Lily had been sent to live with a trusted friend to protect her as well. The medical bills dated after Clara's supposed death were for Lena, who had been helping to manage Clara's affairs discreetly. The letter Eleanor found was from Lena, warning Clara that Marcus was getting closer to discovering her new identity. Eleanor listened, her mind racing, trying to reconcile this new information with everything she had previously learned. It was a convoluted story, filled with desperation and fear, but something still felt off. Why the secrecy from her, his wife? Why not trust her with such a monumental truth? As Daniel pleaded for her understanding, Eleanor noticed a small detail she had overlooked earlier, a faint scent of a particular type of incense she had smelled in the room before, a scent she associated with a specific memory. A memory of Daniel talking on the phone late at night, his voice hushed and anxious, mentioning Lena's name. "Daniel," Eleanor interrupted, her voice sharp. "You said Lena was helping Clara. But that letter, it sounded like Lena was in danger too." Daniel hesitated. His eyes flickered with guilt. He finally confessed that Marcus wasn't just Clara's abusive brother. He was also involved in dangerous criminal activities. Lena had become entangled in his world while trying to help Clara, and the letter was a warning that Marcus had discovered Lena's involvement and was threatening her. The locked room, Daniel admitted, wasn't just a sanctuary for Lily's belongings. It was also a place where he kept evidence, documents, anything that might help expose Marcus and protect Clara and Lena. He had been conducting his own investigation in secret, afraid to involve Eleanor for her own safety. The pieces finally clicked into place, forming a dark and dangerous picture. Daniel hadn't just been hiding a child. He had been protecting a woman who had faked her own death and her sister who was in grave danger. His secrecy, while deeply hurtful, stemmed from a place of fear and a twisted sense of protection. Over the next few days, Eleanor and Daniel had long, difficult conversations. Eleanor grappled with the weight of the truth, the years of deception, and the dangerous reality they were now facing. Despite the pain and betrayal, she couldn't deny the love she still felt for Daniel, and she admired his courage in trying to protect those he cared about. Together, they decided to go to the authorities. Daniel presented the evidence he had gathered, and Eleanor stood by his side, offering her support. The investigation that followed was complex and fraught with risk, but ultimately, Marcus was apprehended, and Clara and Lena were finally safe. The aftermath of the revelations was a period of healing and rebuilding for Eleanor and Daniel. Trust had been broken, but through open communication and a renewed commitment to honesty, they began to find their way back to each other. Lily, now knowing the truth about Eleanor, slowly became a part of their lives, bringing a new dimension of love and joy to their home. The locked room was eventually opened completely, no longer a symbol of secrets but a testament to a complicated past that had ultimately led to a fragile but stronger family unit. The stillness in the old Victorian house remained, but it was no longer a silence filled with unease. It was the quiet hum of a life pieced back together, scarred but whole. As the days turned into months, Eleanor often reflected on the events that had unfolded. The locked room had been the catalyst, the focal point of a mystery that had unraveled their lives. But through the darkness, a new understanding had emerged, a deeper appreciation for the complexities of love, loss, and the lengths people will go to protect those they hold dear. And so, we leave Eleanor, Daniel, and Lily, their journey far from over, but their path forward illuminated by the hard-won truth. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the shadows of secrets and the resilience of the human heart. If you enjoyed this story and want to explore more tales of mystery, suspense, and the hidden lives within seemingly ordinary homes, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next exploration into the unknown. Your support helps us bring more compelling stories to light. Until next time, keep your doors unlocked, but be mindful of what lies hidden within.